Imagine you're getting dinner ready, a juicy flame-grilled steak sizzling over hot charcoal. But have you ever wondered, where did that piece of beef come from? And why has no one told you that it was once rejected by the rest of the world? In mid-2025, over 150,000 tons of American beef were flat-out rejected by Canada, Europe, and several Asian countries. A combination of trade war tariffs and subpar product quality made U.S. beef unwelcome across the globe. But here's the disturbing part: it wasn't destroyed. Instead, it quietly made its way back into the U.S. domestic market, slipping onto supermarket shelves, into budget burger joints, even into schools and nursing homes. No warning signs, no special labels. Watch this video all the way through because you might not realize just how deeply a trade war can affect what ends up on your plate and your family's health. Rejected beef returns to Americans' dinner tables. By mid-2025, over 150,000 tons of American beef had been flatly rejected by international trade partners. Canada, the European Union, Japan, and South Korea, once loyal markets for U.S. food exports, suddenly slammed their doors shut. The issue wasn't price or competition. It was something far more serious. American beef was no longer considered safe. Canadian inspectors detected traces of ractopamine, a banned growth drug, in multiple shipments from Iowa and Nebraska. The EU condemned the lack of oversight in slaughterhouse operations. Japan criticized the poor transparency in cold chain storage and traceability. Slowly, an undeniable truth came to light: the world was losing trust in the safety of the American food supply chain. Even worse, this crisis unfolded in the shadow of escalating tariff wars under the Trump administration policies that pushed longtime allies to break their silence. And while the world said no, all that rejected beef began making its way back to where it started, straight onto the dinner tables of American families. A looming threat to America's food system. When over 150,000 tons of U.S. beef were rejected by foreign buyers, most headlines focused on the economic losses. But the deeper concern lies in a quieter, far more personal consequence: the health risks to everyday Americans. As much of that meat wasn't destroyed, it was quietly redistributed across the U.S. with no warning to consumers. A significant portion of the rejected beef wasn't even turned away due to quality issues. It was fallout from the new wave of tariffs introduced by the Trump administration in 2025. In response, countries like Canada, the EU, and several Asian markets clamped down or completely halted imports of American beef, leaving hundreds of refrigerated containers stranded at ports like Long Beach, Houston, and Savannah. While frozen meat can technically last for months under ideal conditions, ideal is rarely the reality at crowded port facilities. Most cold storage warehouses were never designed to hold such massive volumes for extended periods. Containers were shuffled stacked, sometimes left without power during summer heat waves, all of which threatened the integrity of the meat. Even if the temperature remained low, prolonged freezing can still cause freezer burn, which dehydrates meat, alters its texture, dulls its color, and ruins its natural flavor. More troubling, some shipments were rejected not because of tariffs, but due to serious food safety concerns. Reports from the USDA's Food Safety and Inspection Service confirmed that foreign regulators detected Salmonella listeria and excessive antibiotic residues in many of the returned lots. Some samples even tested positive for ractopamine, a controversial growth stimulant banned in over 150 countries, including major U.S. trading partners like Canada, the EU, and China. The problem isn't that these substances are illegal in the U.S. In fact, domestic regulations allow higher thresholds for antibiotics and growth agents. The real issue is that the federal government is not required to notify the public when rejected exports are rerouted back into domestic circulation. Meanwhile, redistribution happens quietly through discount retail channels, bulk supply contracts to schools, prisons, and public hospitals, or via food assistance programs in low-income areas. Once export labels are removed and the meat is repackaged for U.S. shelves, there's no way for the average shopper to distinguish it. And distributors aren't legally obligated to disclose the product's origin or its inspection history if it re-enters the domestic food chain. The biggest danger falls on society's most vulnerable: seniors' children, and those with weakened immune systems. Listeria monocytogenes, one of the bacteria found, can cause severe illness even in minuscule amounts. It can survive and grow at refrigerator temperatures, and in pregnant women, it can lead to miscarriage, blood infections, or meningitis. The CDC warns that each year in the US, around 1,600 people are infected with listeria, and about 260 die. Most are elderly or suffer from chronic health conditions. And it's not just bacteria. Antibiotic residue poses a long-term threat: antibiotic resistance. Regular exposure to trace antibiotics in food can make real antibiotics less effective when we actually need them. This isn't theoretical. The World Health Organization has called antimicrobial resistance one of the top global health threats. As drug-resistant infections rise in the US, unmonitored meat consumption is only accelerating the problem. Some shipments were also found to contain high levels of sodium nitrite, a preservative used to mask spoilage and extend shelf life. While legal in limited quantities, excessive sodium nitrite can form nitrosamines chemicals classified by the International Agency for Research on Cancer as potentially carcinogenic. Once this meat enters the market at steeply discounted prices, many Americans, especially retirees and low-income families, are likely to purchase it without realizing the risks. Labels like special discount clearance stock or weekly saver are the gateways for rejected products to return to the American dinner table. All of this is happening under a veil of silence. No public alerts, no mass media coverage, no transparency for consumers. This isn't just about trade. It's a red flag that the American food system is eroding public trust, putting commercial interests ahead of public health. While other nations are willing to destroy rejected meat to uphold safety standards, the US often takes a more efficient route: domestic redistribution, a phrase that sounds harmless but shifts the health risk onto American families. And that risk isn't buried in a report or buried in red tape. It's right there in every bite, every burger, every school lunch, silently making its way into the meals of millions of Americans. How are Americans paying the price? When hundreds of millions of dollars worth of US beef was rejected by international markets instead of being destroyed, many of those shipments quietly made their way back into the hands of American consumers. No warning was issued, no guidance from regulatory agencies. Instead, meat that had previously been deemed unfit for import was cleared, relabeled, and funneled back into the domestic distribution chain. The process isn't as complicated as one might think. Export documents are canceled. The shipments are rerouted into domestic channels as if they were fresh batches, often with no clear origin. In many cases, simply changing the batch number and reprinting a barcode is enough to erase the trail. For large distribution companies with established connections to thousands of supermarkets, restaurants, and fast food chains across the country, reintegrating these shipments into the market is far from difficult. As a result, meat once rejected for safety reasons may now be appearing in the daily meals of American families. From popular fast food chains like McDonald's, Burger King, and Wendy's, to retail giants such as Walmart, Kroger, and Costco, and even local family restaurants across the Midwest, no one can confidently say they are not using portions of this once rejected meat. The most immediate consequence is the emergence of alarming health trends. Within just 2 months of the rejected meat being rerouted for domestic sale, the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention reported over 1,200 cases of suspected beef-related food poisoning. Notably, most of the cases occurred in states like Texas, Missouri, Iowa, and Indiana, areas with major cold storage facilities and significant domestic beef consumption. Local health department reports showed common symptoms such as prolonged diarrhea, high fever, severe abdominal pain, and in severe cases, extreme dehydration or sepsis. Lab tests found unusually high frequencies of Salmonella and E. coli in patient samples, raising serious concerns about the safety of beef consumed during this period, especially in fast food chains that do not disclose specific supply sources. But the damage goes beyond physical health. The flood of unsafe meat into the market has severely undermined the American public's trust in the national food system. For generations, Americans believed domestically produced food, especially beef, was safe, tightly regulated, and met international standards. Yet the fact that meat rejected abroad for safety violations could be legally distributed at home has shaken that belief to its core. This collapse in consumer trust is already manifesting in behavior. According to a July 2025 survey by the U.S. National Food Institute, over 42% of respondents said they had reduced their red meat consumption in the past 2 months due to concerns over sourcing and quality. The sharpest decline came from adults over 55, those with weakened immune systems and heightened health awareness. Many have turned to alternative protein sources such as organic chicken, fish, or plant-based options, even if they come at a higher cost. The loss of confidence doesn't stop at individual consumers. Small businesses, family restaurants, and local grocers are also feeling the impact as customers begin questioning the origin of the food they serve. Many establishments have been forced to switch suppliers or implement transparency policies, openly disclosing the source of each ingredient to reassure their clientele. But in a system where traceability has never been a priority, such efforts are little more than a drop in the ocean. The deeper consequence is social instability. Low-income workers, the main consumers of cheap meat and fast food, now face an impossible choice. On one hand, they can't afford more expensive alternatives. On the other, they know what they're eating may pose serious health risks. Feeling abandoned by a system where the government fails to control quality and corporations put profit above public health, A quiet wave of discontent is growing beneath the surface of American society. This is no longer just a meat industry issue. It's a symbol of a broader breakdown in food distribution and oversight. When political and commercial interests allow substandard food to be sold domestically, it reveals a fundamental misalignment in national priorities. The public who fund agencies like the USDA and FDA through their taxes is being treated as the world's dumping ground for what no one else will accept. And the price they pay isn't just a few dollars saved at checkout, it's their health, their trust, and the safety of meals served at their own family tables. A price far too high, and yet it's being paid by those with the least ability to push back. Are you still in control of your own meal? For decades, Americans believed they were the luckiest consumers in the world, free to choose, protected by regulation, and served the highest quality food. But today, that belief is on shaky ground. A question as basic as "what am I eating?" has become surprisingly hard to answer. And with rejected U.S. beef re-entering the domestic market, one uncomfortable truth is emerging. American consumers are no longer in control of their own meals. What used to feel like freedom choosing a dish at a grocery store or restaurant is now largely dictated by an opaque supply chain riddled with inconsistencies and a lack of transparency. A shipment of meat turned away by Europe for high antibiotic residues could be repackaged and sold at a discount in a budget supermarket in Missouri. A cut of beef once blacklisted for failing to meet international standards might wind up in millions of fast food burgers, where supply sources change weekly and no one is required to disclose origins. Even if you read every label, do your homework, and spend extra on products marked organic or natural, there's no guarantee you're in the clear. Food classification standards vary widely across states, and the U.S. inspection system is overwhelmed by the sheer volume of goods, far more than it can realistically monitor. That means the words on the package, "fresh, clean, all natural," can often be just a shiny coat of paint over a system that's broken at its core. This sense of lost control isn't just about the food, it's about the system behind it. When the government fails to issue warnings, refuses to publish lists of rejected shipments, and has no mechanism to force distributors to come clean, consumers are left with only one option to trust luck. Eating an act tied to survival and culture has become a gamble, one where the odds are stacked against those least able to protect themselves. So are you still in control of your own meal? The painful truth is probably not. And that may be the most devastating consequence of all for a society that was built on freedom of choice and faith in the system. We are living in an era where even trust in our daily meals can be manipulated. The 150,000 tons of rejected beef isn't just a trade failure. It's a mirror reflecting a system that prioritizes profit over health and treats the American public as the final dumping ground for the world's leftovers. When food deemed unfit by the global market ends up feeding our own families, the issue at hand is no longer just about hygiene. It's about justice. Who's being protected and who's being left behind.
This video does not promote division within the United States or encourage segregation. All content is presented for the purpose of exploration, analysis, and fostering discussion based on current events, public sentiment, and social trends. We fully respect the United States Constitution and all federal regulations. If today's analysis made you think, drop a comment so we can keep the conversations going. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you will never miss our next independent deep dive.